I know it's a struggle for some of you guys out there. Okay, so I just want you to know that you have my solidarity.
This meme is very real.
When it comes to standing outside soon, I hope you won't have to do it too much. Wear sunscreen. Okay, I know it can be a problem with some of you guys. All right, I'm heavily Irish. Oh no, I'm mixed, but I look white. Get well soon. All right, let's talk about this because this is going to be really interesting. Okay, now I did a little census. I did a little census Reno, not simply because I like to keep track of the white people around, but because you have found yourself amongst a privileged few amount of people. Okay, you found yourself amongst a privileged few.
Very real.
Okay, because you now in some states around the country, either right now or Republicans are pushing for you and your feelings to be protected by law. And I don't mean this like as a meme. I mean this like as the letter of the law. In some jurisdictions around the country, there are laws being pushed and laws that have been pushed to make it so that making white people feel bad is an actual crime, like an actual literal fine, send you to jail crime, right? Now this takes white fragility to an entirely new level, which is pretty wacky. Okay, I tried to cover this a few times. I got it got pushed back, and I'm kind of glad that I did because there's a little bit more stuff that comes out afterwards that we can talk about that goes into it. Let me see. I want to make sure that I got this right. Make sure that I got this right. Okay, perfect meme. Okay, so you hurt my fifis. That is true, especially when it comes to an education sense. If you hurt white people's feelings, it can be it can be an infraction, punishable to up to 5 years in prison, in some instances, which is, may I tell you, absolutely insane. Okay, so what am I talking about? Remember the big push against like CRT? Okay, that was something interesting. Now there's like a big boom bust type thing, another like blip on the radar of outrage memes that conservatives like to get up to help like push through their narrative and stop talking about like actual issues in the country.
This meme is very real.
And so I thought that honestly it was gone. And so the CRT meme is not necessarily around in the same way that it was. They aren't talking about CRT in the same way that they are. It has evolved, but it's evolved in probably the worst possible way imaginable. Okay, so how this has evolved is that Republicans have a new battleground, okay? And that battleground that they have are now school boards, schools, colleges, and education institutions. And with those education institutions, you remember things like PragerU Kids, where they basically lied to kids about what happened during history. Remember when they took where PragerU made that Leo and Layla like rip off sort of like Tim and Moby, ugly flash animation show of like propaganda that they pushed to kids that basically said that Frederick Douglass was like super cool and he felt like we shouldn't be mean to like white people in the US government because America's actually great, even though he was like a slave, and he thought it was really sad. And what he had to say about like being
this
like
meme is very real.
Tortured and forced to like work to almost to death as a slave was that it made him very sad, but he was able to overcome by being an American. And how someone who was actually working to end slavery in the in Congress was actually very evil and very sad to him, even more sad even maybe than being an actual slave, which was that he was very mean to the Constitution. And that honestly was much more sad to him than anything that really could ever happen with slavery, because Frederick Douglass loved America. He loved it more than anything else, actually. Stuff like that. Stuff like teaching kids how to make like U.S. Army reefs out of like camo Raytheon missiles and dead Middle Eastern children. You know, just normal usual stuff like that. It also expanded with people like Matt Walsh writing his book comparing being a woman to being a walrus, which is definitely a take that you could have, especially as someone who supposedly has a wife that he supposedly loves and children. Ben Shapiro going into schools and trying to lie to children, saying that taxes are theft and how they should and how poor people are literally monsters, stuff like that. It has evolved to school boards now, and more local events happening across the country, and this is really unfortunate because that's where a lot of the left is incredibly weak. Incredibly weak. A lot of us on the left are not focusing on small local issues that affect that can affect the country, because at the end of the day, the federal government is important, but the federal government does have less effect on your day-to-day life typically than your municipal or city state government does, or the governments of the states around you do. And this is where a lot of Republicans are targeting. Now, I want to show you a little bit of something, okay? Which is the Senate Education Committee in Indiana, okay? Indiana, you know, the state where Mike Pence has come from, where he went to go couch surf after he got home from DC because because he was scared that Trump supporters were going to come murder him and his wife for not attempting to overturn the election. I want to show you a little something from this bill that lists 8 diverse concepts that educators cannot promote. Now, this bill was written by someone in the Indiana Senate who says that these 8 diverse concepts should not be promoted by educators. And he goes on to talk about some of this stuff. And may I tell you, it gets a little strange. Let's listen into some of this, okay?
Matthew Brookenfield, is that correct? Close? Close. All right. We have Jennifer Smith Margraf following.
Okay, I want to thank the chair and the committee for their time. My name is Matt Bockenfeld, and I've taught U.S. History and Ethnic Studies in Fishers for 7 years. I'm here for my students today who are wonderful and creative, and they want so desperately to gain the tools to breathe life into the American promise. My concern with the bill today lies in the passage that seems to ban curriculum that could encourage a student to experience discomfort or distress in relation to their identity. Respectfully, teachers don't understand what this means. In the lounge yesterday, some teachers were thinking that we're being called to transform our classrooms into pulpits of propaganda, where teachers have to wrap the flag over our students' eyes so that they don't question the noble origin of our nation. Others think it means we have to carefully police classroom conversations to prevent students from fully sharing their opinions about gender and race. Whatever the intent of this passage, the undeniable vagueness of its language ensures that it will have a chilling effect on the most important conversations in our classrooms.
Which is really interesting, right? So what's the bill that he's talking about, and who's pushing it? There's a very important thing, okay? All right, so what we're looking at sections from Matt himself, the teacher here. But another really important thing, okay, is that someone from the education committee decided that he disagreed with Matt, actually, and he had some words for Matt, his classroom, and what he should be teaching in that classroom.
Stand up and say who we voted for or anything like that, but we're not neutral on Nazism. We take a stand in the classroom against it, and it matters that we do.
I'm not discrediting as a person Marxism, Nazism, fascism. I'm not discrediting any of those isms out there. And I have no problem with the education system providing instruction on the existence of those isms. I believe that we've gone too far when we take a position on those isms as it relates to, we need to be impartial. Again, I'm going to use this term. We need to be the purveyors of reason. We just provide the facts. The kids formulate their own viewpoints.
So what was that? What? Can we hear this one more time?
Marxism, Nazism, fascism. I'm not discrediting any of those isms out there.
Marxism, Nazism, fascism. Let's not discredit these isms. Let's be impartial on these isms. This is Senate Bill 167 in Indiana, okay? And what this bill does, what with a plethora of things, basically makes guidelines and enforces teachers to not be able to tell students that Hitler and the Nazis were bad. It is against the state. It would be against the state laws to say that, to tell teachers killing 6 million Jewish people and 10 million people total of undesirables is bad. You can't say that, because that would be taking a position on isms. And we need to make sure that kids form their own ideas, right? Right? Yeah, like, right? Right? Wow, that's so interesting. Isn't it, how that works? The bill doesn't just stop there. It goes to a bunch of other really incredible things as well. You're right. What he is pushing is anti-Semitism, because trying to put things like Marxism, fascism, and Nazism together as like isms that are like that you must teach neutrally, as well as like capitalism and other isms out there, starting to sound like JLP, like isms don't exist. I don't believe in isms. All isms are just the same. Is incredibly anti-intellectual and will create a free speech and chilling effect on teachers being able to express to their kids actual history. I'm sorry. I think it's actually good to teach kids that that genocide is bad. I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to teach them that slavery happened and it's bad. I think it's good to teach them that women's disempowerment was real, happened, and it's bad. And I think it's good to teach them who did it, why, when, and for how long, and what effect that has today. That is important. But they don't think so. This reminds me of General Milley's response to when he was confronted by the House and Senate on promoting Marxism in the military.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. I know my time is very precious, but I would like to yield some of my time to General Milley, because I know that he had some comments that he wanted to make when Representative Gates was talking, as well as Mr. Waltz, about a similar subject of the stand down and race theory. Would you like a minute or so to comment on that? Do you remember what your line of questioning or thought was there?
Sure. First of all, on the issue of critical race theory, et cetera, I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university. And it is important that we train and we understand. And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that, because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders, now and in the future, do understand it.
For U.S. Army General, I think that this is pretty insightful. Thank you. Appreciate you. No matter what you think about Milley or how he is lib-pilled, which he is, I think that this is incredibly insightful and really important to be able to learn, to want to learn. Republicans don't want you to learn. The Republicans don't want you to be able to learn, okay? The thing is, when it comes to Republicans, think about it for a second, okay? What have they been doing? When they got into office in 2016, what did they do? Nothing. They tried to, remember how they were talking for 10 years that they were going to repeal and replace Obamacare. They had the House, they had the Senate. They didn't have to get a single Democratic vote. And they had like pretty reasonable majorities in both. Now, not a lot, but they had reasonable majorities. In 10 years, they didn't come up with a single plan to be able to actually replace Obamacare. They just wanted to repeal it. And that was basically it. They didn't come up with a single plan that actually worked and was actually it was going to do anything. They don't care. Republicans don't govern. That's not what they're meant to do. They've turned themselves into a complete opposition party whose only existence is to foil anything that the Democrats want to do. And so with that being said, they've completely given up on actually trying to convince people of their political ideology. They've seated themselves, a lot of them, and I'm talking about mostly elected Republicans here, they've put themselves in the position where instead of trying to teach people things, instead of trying to get people to actually genuinely believe their positions, what they do now is trying to control the narrative and flow of information. It's very It's very or Orwell 1652. I've read the book. It's about when the government does stuff and then the government tells you that you cannot do stuff. I've read the book before, just like 1984. Many people are saying this. What's the name of the bill? It's SB 167, if I remember correctly. SB 167. And this is part of a movement across the country that a lot of conservatives are trying to push that now rides on the back of panic, fear, and lies that they are pushing to stifle the flow of information to children of like their history, of their history, of the future, of the country, of topics that are important. Because we're now living in a new moral panic. Remember when people talked about things like the satanic panic, where like where conservatives tried to get things like rock music and Pokemans and Digimons and video games banned because like they're evil or something along those lines. Remember that? Or like McCarthyism and the Red Scare. And that felt like so long ago and that felt so weird, but we're living in that once again. We're living in that time right now where conservatives are pushing once again things like teaching kids about race, teaching kids about the actual history of the country, teaching kids about race and gender, sexuality, things along those lines that are important, identity, that are important, that they want to make sure that they keep away from them because it's politically efficacious for them to not be able to look at any of this information. It's more honed now. Before it was just like a weird amalgamation of like evangelicals and stuff like that. It's a little bit more honed now because now there are actual ringleaders like pulling the levers who actually have a real stated goal and plan, which is to control the flow of information to change the world, so kids know less. And so they'll be more likely to be for a lot of like conservative policies in that way. It's really unfortunate. We can take a look at what's in Bill 167. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at some bullet points. Teachers must post lesson plans and curricular materials in advance with sufficient time for a parental review. Parents can opt their children out of any part of the curriculum, and teachers will have to provide a different lesson plan to that child. So not only do teachers not get a pay raise or anything, but now teachers will be forced to show their like post parents like literally every single thing that they're going to teach. And not only that teachers that parents can now like min-max and make their own bespoke teaching regimens. They can exclude anything that they want from their kid. Anything about race, mathematics, English, anything. If there's something that they go through that they think that their child should not be taught for any reason, no matter what, now the teacher will be compelled to be able to make an entirely new curriculum with massive holes in it because someone's parents didn't want them to learn about like who Christopher Columbus was or something along those lines, or that slavery happened. Because now, what is this? Like they learned from Tucker Carlson that teaching slavery basically means that it teaches that white people are evil and stinky. And so now if you just don't teach any of that history of anything that people who were white, if anything that they did bad throughout time, then kids will never feel bad about themselves. Because you know what's more important than learning about history? Not feeling personally bad about anything that ever happened. That's it. That's what's more important. Did someone say compelled speech? Yeah, my kid can't learn my kid can't learn order of operations. That's true. Under this bill, you can do that. A parent can say, I don't want my kid to learn about PEMDAS, and the teacher will now have to put them through a curriculum without PEMDAS. It's wild. Any part of the curriculum, anything. They can bespoke make sure their kid doesn't know anything about simple mathematics because of this. This is pure insanity. And I think it's good for parents to be more up to date on like what's happening in schools and like what their kids are learning, so they can like learn along with them. I for one, I think that's important, and can be up to date on what's actually happening. But this sort of like insane type of control, where I don't think schools should be about this. Schools should be where kids are able to learn about facts and history without the influence of what people think they should learn. Schools are supposed to be about what you ought to learn, not about what you should learn. I think there are some things parents that's fine for them to teach. I and that's fine, whatever. I do think schools should be a place where, especially when it comes to very abusive parents, should not be able to control literally everything that their kid is ever able to understand or learn. It enables abuse to a level that I don't think we've this enables abuse to a level that I can't even like express to you. Like being able to like stifle your kid's education to this much, where you can curtail basically your kid out of learning anything in school. If a parent wanted to, they could send their kid to school and say that the teachers are like legally bound to not teach them anything. They have to like sit their kid in the hallway as they have a curriculum, and then the kid is given like a single black crayon and a piece of paper, and they're not allowed to like draw anything that isn't like pre-approved by their parents. That level of like control of your kid's life is insane. Okay, I know in this country we like to teach children like treat children like property, but I think they're a little bit more than that. And I think that they should have the ability. That's what school is for, to have the ability to escape abusive parents and abusive situations. Okay, it should be a place where those parents, don't have this sort of wild, insane control over every aspect of their life. They should be able to learn things they should be able to learn things that they ought to, and not just things that their parents want them to. This is vitally important to someone growing up, especially when we don't take kids out of like abusive households in near the amount of time that we should. Okay, listen. Hard copies of course materials are not electronic, must be located in the office for parental review. The curriculum of the district will be determined by a committee of 60% parents and 40% community members and educators, and all members of the committee board must be school board approved, but the requirement to be a teacher is not a part of being on the committee. So what happens is that parents will now be able to 60% parents and community members. Now parents will be able to 100% control the teachers that are now making the curriculums. Okay, not even have an input, 100% control, and they have all of the and they have a 60% majority to be able to overturn anybody that they just don't like. And now with that 60% majority, they can now completely curtail who's on that board and can exclude any actual educators from being a part of the curriculum that the educators are part of. Wild. Bans educators from repeatedly interacting with students on social emotional issues without prior parental consent. Example, an educator would be forbidden from responding to a student who discloses that they're having suicidal thoughts if the student has disclosed this before and the teacher doesn't have the parent's permission to respond. So if a kid doesn't trust their parent and they go to a teacher and says that they're suicidal, the teacher cannot like console the kid. The teacher has to now completely emotionally rebuff the kid and say nothing about it. And they are not allowed to respond to a kid saying that they are suicidal, and they just have to completely cold shoulder emotionally, like keep the like stiff arm the kid until they get parental's approval to say that they can tell their kid that they shouldn't kill themselves. How is this legal? States have a lot of control about like what they can do based on like education, and also the Democrats won't be able to pass anything at the moment to stop these states from being able to do stuff like this. This is what Republican moral panic leads to. This is what it leads to, right? This is what it will always lead to. This conservative moral panic will always lead to making people less free, to making children more property, and making it so that they can control everything that happens into their kid's life to any degree that they want. The kid will not be able to learn anything without every parent's approval of it first. They can be barred from learning anything about history, science, English, math, anything until their parents 100% approve of it, or they can't even get emotional support on suicidal ideation until their parent says it's okay for the teacher to say that the kid shouldn't kill themselves. Like this list, the bill was killed. It's cool that the bill was killed. Cool. And if you want to, look it up. It's Bill 167 it's Bill 167 in Indiana. You can look it up. You can Google it. Bill 167 in Indiana. The bill was killed. That's good. I was gonna get to that. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm presenting here, but okay. I guess it doesn't matter. I guess teachers always break the rules to save kids. Yeah, sometimes it is very important. Shark, chill out. I'm just saying. I'm partly memeing, but also sometimes, sometimes it can be a little much. But I'm partly memeing. Don't worry. I'm not mad at you. I'm not actually mad at you. Nazis don't have low moral character. Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? Right? Wild. As we discussed during this week's hearing on the bill, it bans teachers. It bans teaching the Nazis and similar political parties were of low moral character. All right, guys, can I get a little show of hands? Who thinks that the Nazis have low moral character? Just a little show of hands real quick. A Nazi wrote this bill. It does feel like a Nazi wrote this bill. You can't say that the Nazis are bad. That's a wild take, don't you think? Me, I do. Don't worry. If this bill would have passed, it would have been illegal. Wild, isn't that work? Many other bans and prohibitions on teaching listed below. A penalty for being perceived to violate this law. A parent could file a complaint leading to the unpaid suspension, termination, and license revocation of an educator. So basically, if this bill would have passed, it would have said that if a kid would have come to a teacher and said that they are suicidal, and then the teacher would have given the kid a hug and said that it was okay, the teacher could have the parent could have filed a complaint, which could lead to the teacher being put on unpaid leave or fired and unable to teach in Indiana. Also, librarians could be jailed for disseminating material deemed as harmful. Talk about 1984. Jailed for promoting harmful material. Wow. That's the same as that's some book burning shit. It is book burning type stuff. Now, thankfully, as we said, the bill has been killed. But the thing is, this is just a catalyst, okay? This was just a catalyst. Even though this bill, as wild as it is, doesn't mean that it hasn't sparked other other ideas around the country that other Republicans have run with to put through actual bills and to propose actual legislation and school board rules that echo what we just read. Here from Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida. Let's talk about this. How he hates liberal educators teaching kids to hate the country.
That political agenda is they want these kids to hate this country. They want them to reject our founding, our institutions, and they want to replace that with their leftist ideology, which would obviously be disastrous for this country's future. So the stakes are very high on that. But there's a problem when you can say it, you can't do it. But what if they defy you? What if they're doing it? And so what we're going to be doing in this upcoming legislative session, we're going to give parents the ability to go in and get legal relief if they're not following our state standards with respect to history and government. And I think empowering parents to be involved, making sure parents have a right to inspect the curriculum. And it's not just about critical race theory. I mean, there's a lot of other inappropriate content that can be smuggled in by public schools. And in some parts of the country have it way worse than Florida in that regard. So parents, this idea of parents don't have a right to be involved in that political.
So yeah, and this tells you a lot. Smuggling, like drugs, that's what a lot of conservatives and Republicans think of education as. Drugs, okay? Because it does harm. Learning, thinking, understanding, having media literacy, having understanding of actual history, and this is what they're calling critical race theory and Marxism and whatever. Remember? Okay? Remember when this was going on? What places what people pushing like anti-critical race theory, what they were pushing anti like things like learning about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. That's what they're pushing against, okay? That's how they view it, as paraphernalia. It's illegal. It's really interesting how you push now education as something akin to an actual drug, an illegal substance, like it's a bomb that teachers are carrying into the class. I'm going to tell you now, you know what's really wild about this? Now in Florida, they're focusing more on stopping education from reaching kids in schools than bullets. Wild, isn't it? They've now they're passing more laws and focusing way more on stopping kids from learning about history than getting shot in school. It's weird how that works. Wild. It's easy. With this, it will be easier to bring guns into school than actual education for their kids. Sounds like Florida culture? Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It do, don't it? It do, don't it? Now, this brings us to today and Florida, all right? Oh, my bad. Sorry, I missed one thing. I missed one thing as well. There is HB in Missouri. So, like I said, this is going around a lot of like conservative states as well. There's another one based off of the one in Indiana. This one's going on in Missouri. This is the Parents' Bill of Rights is what they're calling it. And basically what this does is that this is going to do the same thing where it allows parents to like curtail and opt their kid out of any part of the curriculum that they find objectionable. That on top of the fact that it will impose fines for teachers who break these laws. So now they'll be able to be sent to jail, be fined like hundreds of dollars. I'm like parking traffic violation type fines for teaching their kids something like, oh, dude, like gay people exist, when their teachers told them specifically not to tell the kids that gay people exist. Wild, isn't it? Now, this is another bill that hasn't gone anywhere. Thankfully, if I can click here, this hasn't gone anywhere. It was filed and now it's like in the committee. The last time it was touched, it was in was earlier last month, around the 11th. Okay, so this may have died in the committee. I haven't looked at it entirely, but this hasn't been touched in a while. This hasn't been moving, but this is an unprecedented attack on education in the future of this country. The Republicans have seen that they are losing the youth of this country, that they haven't been able to actually get them to agree with their political positions. And so instead of getting them to agree, they're going to make sure that they aren't able to learn enough to choose for themselves not to be a part of it. So embroil them, indoctrinate them into your ideology and make it near impossible for them to be able to escape. And so this brings us to Texas. Let's talk about Texas for a second, okay? Where book burning and book banning has reached an all-time high in the country. And Texas is a little bit of a catalyst for this type of stuff going on around the country, okay? This is from a investigative report from NBC News, and it's really interesting. It's called Banned. Books on race and sexuality are disappearing from Texas schools in record numbers. So now this has never happened before, okay? What's basically happening is that the legislature and school boards are being overrun by insane radical Republicans. And what they're doing is they're doing a new moral panic. And what that means is now they're removing any book that they don't like that involves race, that involves sexuality, that involves identity, anything along those lines that can get a kid to question how the world works, who they are, or to think a little bit more deeply about the things that they've been presented. Is going to be completely banned, and they don't want kids to be able to have access to this at all. Not only that, they're going to be fining, suing, and throwing not only teachers, but educators and librarians in jail if their libraries contain such material that they deemed as anti their agenda. Quick. Yeah, imagine being so ashamed of your history, you need to hide it. Imagine. From a scheduled spot in her high school library, a 17-year-old girl spoke softly into her cell phone, worried that someone might overhear her say things she'd hidden from her parents for years. They don't know she's queer, the student told the reporter, and that given the past comments about homosexuality being a sin, she's long feared She long feared they would learn her secret if they saw what she reads in the library. The space, with its endless rows of books about characters from all stories and backgrounds, has been her safe haven, she said, one of the few places where she feels completely free to be herself. But books, including one of her recent favorites, have been vanishing from shelves in Katy Independent School District libraries the past few months. Gone. Jack Hart's and the Other Parts, a book she read last year about a gay teenager who isn't shy about discussing his adventures in a sex life, also banned. The Handsome Girl and Her Beautiful Boy, All Boys Aren't Blue, and Lawn Boy, all coming of age stories that predominantly feature LGBTQ characters and passages about sex. Some titles were removed after parents formally complained, but others were quietly banned by the district without an official review. As I struggle with my own identity as a queer person, it's been really important to me that I have access to these books, the girl said, to whom NBC News is not naming for revealing her sexuality. And I'm sure it's really important to the other queer kids. You should be able to see yourself reflected on the page. Her safe haven is now a battleground in an unprecedented effort by parents and conservative politicians in Texas to ban books dealing with race, sexuality, and gender from schools, NBC News investigation has found. Hundreds of titles have been pulled from libraries across the state for review, sometimes over the objections of school librarians, several of whom spoke to NBC News. Say they face increasingly hostile work environments and mounting pressure to preemptively pull books that might draw complaints. Records request to nearly 100 school districts in Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio and Austin regions, a small sampling of the state's 1,200 public school systems, revealed 75 formal requests by parents or community members to ban books from libraries during the first 4 months of the school year. In comparison, only one library book challenge was filed in those districts during the same time period a year earlier, the records show. A handful of districts reported more challenges this year than in the past 2 decades combined. Who's organizing this? Half of these places don't even got in-class learning. It's wild how that works, isn't it? It's almost like it's not actually about trying to keep kids safe, or it's not really about trying to make sure that kids are free from what they're calling in these books pornography. It's almost like there's a more insidious plan here that's being put together that's not really about the protection of the kids, but more about stifling information to stop kids from learning about who they are and that different people in the world exist, to hopefully indoctrinate them into never, trying to learn that they're different from what their parents want to try to force them to be. That's what it's really about. Now, this isn't like an organization as in like there's like necessarily like puppet masters or anything, but they're people who know what they're doing. Just like with the CRT, like panic, there are people who fomented this ideology who are pushing it specifically to wrap up everything related to race and throw it away. So we now view things like slavery, the Confederates, the Civil War in a different light that's more favorable to conservatives, slave drivers, the South, and things along those lines, because that's their political goal. Same way with here, what they're trying to do is stop the LGBT movement, movements about race where they began, which is learning. That's what it's about. They're trying to go to the source of where people learn to be different than what conservatives want them to be, which is where they learn. So if they can stop kids from learning anything, what their goal is to kneecap race movements, like civil rights movements, before they even start, and hopefully stomp them out, but before those seeds are able to germinate, to be able to push for things like more civil rights, like more tolerance for people to exist as how they want. They want to force more people into the closet and force more of these things like out of the room for discussion, because they don't even want to try to argue with them anymore. They have no arguments against them. What they want to do is make sure that nobody's able to see it anymore, so they won't even have to try and make an argument. So nobody's even going to expect them to have an argument because it won't be in question. That's the real goal, okay? So people like Tucker Carlson, Fox News, other conservative outlets, Steven Crowder, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, these types of people who are at like the forefront of like conservative media pushing this type of stuff, that's their goal at the end of the day. That is their goal. And they're using it, and they're doing the same thing that they did during McCarthyism, during the Red Scare, during the moral panic, satanic panic. They're doing the same thing that they did before. There are people who make money off of this. There are people whose political goals are to stifle this flow of like information, and that's why this is happening. And they're using people's scared parents, because fear is one of the most useful emotions that a public can have. You can use fear and mold it into anything and get people to do near anything that you want them to if they're scared enough and you give them enough reasons to be scared of something and to do something about it. Once you're scared, once you don't know what to do, that's when you can like whip people into doing things that you want. And that's what they're doing. That's why they push things like this. They're making people scared. Now that they have these people, these white people, thinking that white people are now the most oppressed group in all of the country. And so they see themselves as, I'm going to tell you this, and this is going to sound like a meme, but I promise you, if you ever talk to any of these people, this is what they believe. They believe that they're Rosa Parks, okay? They believe that they're Gandhi. They believe, some of them even believe, honestly, that they're like Harriet Tubman, okay? They believe that they're Frederick Douglass. They believe that they're like Du Bois, okay? They believe that these type of people, okay, that they're at the forefront and they're going to be remembered in history as standing up for civil rights and stopping this evil from creeping across the land. They genuinely believe it. They do believe that they're the main characters, and they're going to control the narrative. They do believe. People like Tucker Carlson genuinely believe that they're people like that they're the MLK of their time. 100%. It's wild. And here are some of the books that they've been banning, right? Out of the Darkness, Lawn Boy, Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, Losing the Girl, Book 1, All Boys Aren't Blue, a coming-of-age memoir by a queer Black author about his struggles with racism and accepting his identity, The Nerdy and the Dirty, told from alternative perspectives of a pair of 16-year-olds. The book is about teens exploring romance, sexuality, and identity. Jack of Hearts, a 17-year-old boy who has a lot of sex and isn't ashamed of it. The school's library journal says that the sex-positive depiction of gay male teen in Jack of Hearts is an essential addition to the library that serves for teens. But they said that this is we cannot unread this type of content, and I want to protect my kids' hearts and minds from this. I just want to mention I've never said the F word ever in my life before until just now. Nice. The culture is devouring our children. Why are you not standing in the gap for our children? Is what some of these people say about some of this type of stuff. Why are you sexualizing our children? One parent had to say. Why are our libraries filled with pornography? Not the F word. Not the F word. Does Tucker Carlson believe his own bullshit? Some of it he doesn't. With these types of people, they don't have to believe everything that they do. That's not the point. And honestly, it doesn't even really matter because they even if they don't believe it, they want their audience to believe it because it's beneficial to them. A lot of people throughout time who push these type of narratives, they don't believe the type of stuff that they're saying. If you ever hear like somebody like a conservative or like some wild wacky person say something incredibly insane, there is a decent likelihood, now it's not all the time, but there's a decent likelihood that they don't believe what they just said, but it's beneficial to them no matter what. The narrative is beneficial to them no matter what. So they'll still say it, they'll still say they believe it, and they'll still push it to other people because it's beneficial to them. It always, and it always will be. It doesn't really matter whether it's true or not. If it's beneficial, they'll use it no matter what. No matter how many people it hurts, no matter how true it really is. That's what matters to them. Similar debates are riling communities across the country, fueled by parents, activists, and Republican politicians who have mobilized against school programs and classroom lessons focused on LGBTQ issues and the legacy of racism in America. Last fall, some national groups involved in the effort, including No Left Turn in Education and Moms for Liberty, began circulating lists of school library books that they said were indoctrinating kids into dangerous ideologies, right? And so this is what they're talking. They interviewed some teachers as well. I'm no saint. I got out because I was afraid to stand up to these attacks. I didn't want to get caught in someone's snare. Who wants to be called a pornographer? Who wants to be accused of being a pedophile or reported to the police for putting a book in a kid's hand? Reported to the police for putting a book in a kid's hand. That's what librarians all across Texas and some other Republican states are now fearing, that the fact that they can be thrown in jail, reported to the police, get their house raided for a child checking out a book in their library. And so here's their books that they want burned in Texas. 50 books, 50 whole books. Drama. A parent asked administrators at Spring Branch Independent School District in Houston to pull this book. Said to question It leads children to question their sexual orientation when they don't even comprehend what that means. This book, when Wilma Rudolph played basketball, it opines prejudice based on race. Lawn Boy, admiring people with low moral values and hate and to hate one another. Better Nate Than Ever. Books should discuss sensitive and personal topics such as gender and sexuality, because they wanted the book to be removed, specifically since it shouldn't cover topics like gender and sexuality. 567 Nate and other books. There's 50 books in total that they wanted removed. They wanted this one to be removed because it made kids feel ashamed based on their skin color. Once again, you can throw kids in jail.
This meme is very real.
For making white people feel sad. Now, if the kids feel sad based on like what other people who of their same skin tone did in the past, imagine how the people who actually had to live through that
This meme is very
feel
real.
about what happened to them and their family. It's weird how that works, right? You don't care about that. Imagine. So this is what's going on. This is the world that we're living in, okay? And this is why I tell you all of the time, it's important to focus on issues that are important in your community. You may not be able to affect everything and anything going on like on the federal level or on the world stage. Here's the thing. Well, a lot of other people are worried about things like, a lot of like Dems and other like people are worried about things like Ukraine and Russia. And even like earlier today or yesterday, Biden even said that they're retracting their statement that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is imminent, which is funny how that works, right? But they're focusing on things like that and how like a lot of lefties are not involved in electoral politics at all, or even this isn't necessarily electoral politics, but more like ground level politics in this way that involve things like schools, things like city boards, stuff like that. Well, they're not involved. Republicans and conservatives are making hay while they are able to live like roaches in the darkness while people aren't paying attention. I'm glad that this is getting some more information now. I'm glad that this is getting some more notoriety because this is incredibly important. What they're trying to do across this country is make sure that people, especially kids, aren't able to learn about their history, aren't able to learn about how the world works, aren't able to learn how their bodies even work, aren't able to learn that it's okay to interact with some people in ways that their parents don't always think that they need to be able to know that they are normal and they are acceptable and they are okay and they are not evil or like terrible or disgusting based on like who they are, and learn about the actual history of this country, because learning all those things leads people down a path to not be conservative, to not look at the world the way they do, to not lie about the world, to not misunderstand the world, misconstrue the world, and push for more things like progress, civil rights. So what they're doing, instead of trying to teach anybody about trying to convince people, what they're trying to do is lie to people and make sure that kids aren't able to get the information that they need to come to decisions themselves. They've learned that letting kids and letting people in the country come to decisions themselves isn't beneficial to them. It's the same thing. It's basically their ideology when it comes to voting, that voting, okay, when everybody is allowed to vote, it doesn't benefit conservatives very much. So what do? They go on the opposite end, and what they do there, okay, is they make sure that you aren't able to vote, that some people are just a little less equal than others, that some people just aren't able to access this, that some people just aren't able to see this, so some people aren't able to participate, and some people aren't able to learn this type of topics. That's the issue. That's why I say it's really important to get involved in your community. It's more important than anything outside of like revolutionary memes. Like the work that you can do today to not only push the country in a better direction, but to stop the right from taking the country in a demonstrably worse direction is vitally important. Even things like we didn't even really think about, like school boards that a lot of lefties aren't talking about, are vitally important. That is something so integral to a community, where kids grow up on. We know what happens when people aren't given adequate education. It isn't good. So I tell you, if you are thinking about getting into politics and you are thinking about doing something and you don't know what to do, you're mad this segment made you mad, or you're angry, or you don't know what to do, or you're upset, I would ask you to take some time and channel that into doing something good. Even if you don't have something like this going on in your community, I would greatly implore you to go to a city board meeting, to go to a school board meeting, even if you're not in the school. I mean, come on, remember, Matt Walsh bought a house in a different state just so he could go harass some more trans kids, okay? If you can do that and pull that type of stuff there to go like yell for 30 seconds about why you think trans people are stinky at a local city board meeting, where you live, you can do something where you live to influence your city board. Your school board, your city board, things along those lines. Many things can happen, and a lot of good can be done at that very ground level that is 5 minutes from where you, 10 minute drive from where you live. You can affect like the trajectory of this country and the trajectory of thousands of children by getting involved at that very low level. I would implore you to. I think you absolutely should. Give it a try, especially like some people living in some of these states and some of these cities that we just talked about. I think it's really important. So, thankfully, and I want more of us to talk about it. Like this year and years prior, there have been a lot of people, a lot of lefties who've ran for a lot more like smaller committee seats. And even though we focus on big things like mayors and governors and presidents and all of this sort of stuff, there's been a lot of lefties, not even just like progressives, I'm talking like socialists and further left than that, who've been able to get into committee seats and who are now affecting positive change around the country at their city level. And I think that's an amazing thing, and we need to focus more on that. And when more elections come by, we're going to be focusing on that as well, because it gives you a different outlook. Okay, so when we lose like 3 governor races or something, or when we lose like 4 like mayoral races or something, or like a house seat, you can remember that for every like lost seat there are like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 wins in much smaller places that actually affect people's lives on a day-to-day basis. So give it a try. All right, just give it a look. All right, like a lot of those people, a lot of those Republicans who are sitting on a lot of cash and who want the world to be a worse place, even if they don't believe so, are able to affect the politics in a way that we need to be able to counter. So get out there, go make the world a better place. I know you can do it.